Okay, I want to thank you for staying with me for so long on these videos. I've tried to keep them short, and I hope that you've been able to go back and review them and um, try out your own analysis as we were going forward. Um, I thought I would break for just a quick second here. Some of you may recognize this person. His name was Jimi Hendrix. He played the guitar. I think he died when he was, 27 or something like that. Anyway, he was renowned for coming into the studio and making 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 different takes of a given record before a given song before he was happy with it. I was thinking as I was doing this, it's somewhat like recording. I'm sitting at my desk recording. I am not making a lot of different different versions, as you probably will have guessed, because of so many errors that I'm making in these videos. I hope you'll bear with me. And when you have time today, sometime go listen to some of Jimi Hendrix. He was great. Okay, before in the last video we talked a little bit about the one-tailed and two-tailed test. I really would like for you to review that, and we'll talk about that in class. It's an important topic. There's lots of material out there on the web. In the meantime, what I really want to do is go back to some SPSS analysis. Now, we have talked about several things. We've talked about how to compare males and females on a single outcome. We've talked about how to reverse the order of the test by changing the order of the group assignment within the dialog box in SPSS. We've also looked at how to compare two groups in a larger collection. So for instance, we looked at Hispanic students versus Asian students, I believe, just by pointing to them differently within our t-test. We talked about statistical power, and related to statistical power, of course, is the idea of whether we're dealing with two-tailed or one-tailed test. Now, if you, just to kind of to build back on the previous video, if you are smart enough to or not smart enough, that's not the right word. If you're brave enough to put together a one-tailed or directional alternative hypothesis, then you benefit by getting to divide this value by 2. So, if you end up with a 0.1 and divide by 2, then you end up with a 0.05, and you could reject the null hypothesis if you have a directional alternative hypothesis. Let's go back and do a couple more things with our analysis before I stop this series. Now, a couple of you have been interested in collapsing across different types of variables. So let's go back and let's do this transformation that we talked about before that's called recoding. What we can do is we can take variables, especially nominal variables, but sometimes other variables, in which we may have groups of individuals that we want to lump into one group, and another set of individuals we want to lump into another group. So let's do that with the recode. And what happens is we create a new variable. So I'm going to recode into a different variable, and I'm going to use the religious attendance at church just for a beginning here. So we're going to recode into a different variable. I'm going to come down here to how religious are you? But before I do that, let me do something instead. Like I said, I didn't edit this 59 times like Jimi Hendrix might have. So let's do an analysis of that variable. Sometimes what we try to do is see where there are logical breaks in things. So let's go to how religious I think religiosity, the strengths of religious beliefs, may have a difference in things like risky behavior and things like that. So let's just take a look. So I've moved how religious over to the variables. I'm going to run a frequency distribution. And here I see that we have people who are very religious, people who are moderately religious, and people who are not at all religious. Well, let's see. What we may want to do is people who say they have any religious feelings, that is, people who are very religious and moderately religious, group them into one group, and group those who say they're not at all religious into another group. In other words, collapse across 1 and 2 to create a new group, and leave number 3 by itself to create a not at all religious group. Does that make I hope that makes sense to you. We can do this with any variable like that. So now let's go back to my transform. I'm going to recode this how religious are you into a different variable. And I'm going to call this low versus, I'm going to call this religious, R-E-L-I-G, versus not religious. How about that? And I'm just going to put a little underscore here. Okay, I don't really need a label. I think the name of the variable makes sense. Now when I click this change, see up here there's a question mark here. When I click this change down here, that's going to move this variable up to here. Watch. Bingo. Okay, so now what I have to do is I have to define the old and the new values. I want for very religious to stay a 1, and I want for moderate religious to be a 1, and then not at all religious, maybe I want those to be a 0. Okay, so let's do that. I'm going to say that the old value of a 1 gets to stay a 1. So if they were a 1 in the old variable, leave them a 1 in the new variable. If they were a 2, that's moderately religious, let's make them a 1 in the new. And if they were a 3, that is not at all religious, let's say they were a 0. Now we just say continue. And we say OK. Now let's do this. Let's cross-tab these two variables. Oops, excuse me. Cross-tab. I want to cross-tab. I'll have to move this over for you. I want to cross-tab this how religious with my new variable, which is going to be all the way at the end of the data set. And I'm just going to say, okay, I'm not trying to do any kind of statistical test here. I just want to see if my recoding worked. Okay, let's see how this worked. Here's the old variable in which I had very religious, moderately, not at all. And I wanted to make sure I had just 2 categories now. So if they were very religious, now they get coded as a 1. If they were moderate religious, they get coded as a 1. But if they said not at all religious, they get coded as a 0. Okay, let's stop this right now and come back and use this in just a moment. I don't want this video to get too long. So please go back and review it and see how this might be useful in your assignment.